Well, hi, everyone. This is Bill Kenny. I hope you're doing really well. We do expect more folks to be popping on as we go here. But I want to welcome you all today to our webinar, Taming the Marketing Funnel, How to Integrate Your Marketing. So this is a topic that has come up sort of again and again, and we continue to see all sorts of opportunities for companies to improve how they market by leveraging the marketing they're already doing. In other words, that they're creating plenty of activity and potential energy. The issue is really leveraging that. So we want to make sure that we take care of all these types of issues. So let's see. I have one kind of operational thing I'm trying to figure out here. Let's see, excuse me. This is a slightly new interface, and I just want to make sure I'm giving everybody access. So yeah, we look good here. So in any event, I would encourage you to make sure that you ask questions, that you add to the conversation. I'm going to go off screen here in just a moment and put some slides up. And certainly I would love to see any questions from you all as we get going. So why am I not seeing where I can go to slides? Oh, there we are. Gosh, right in front of me. That's brutal. Okay, so, and we should be now sharing. Okay, well, cool. So again, our title is Taming the Marketing Funnel, How to Integrate Your Marketing. Real simple. The way most marketing happens today, it's just a bunch of instruments. In other words, it's just a pile of instruments. We do some e-news, we do some, maybe some events, we do a variety of social media. We have some paid advertising, we have a website, all those various components or modes. And obviously the goal we want is to get to a place where those instruments play beautiful music. And kind of the adage that is quite often heard, particularly around budget time, is we know that 50% of our marketing dollars are wasted. We just don't know which 50%. Which is obviously a massive challenge. So we need to make sure that we take care of the investment we're making in marketing. And it's one thing to learn, and it's another thing to convert that learning into change, into positive change, in a way to evolve what we're doing so we optimize the results. So we might be able to accept 50% of our money being wasted sort of over a shorter period of time, and then obviously moving to a place where more of it is leveraged and more of that investment is actually bearing fruit. And that's really what our goal is. And that's to play beautiful music. We want all of these instruments to work well together and to create opportunity for us. So you all submitted some wonderful questions. We're going to make sure we get to those. But before we get to those, we're going to get through some, I think, what would be really helpful content. So we're going to talk a little bit about getting started, the marketing funnel itself, a case study that hopefully is instructive, and then how to integrate your marketing, kind of 3 basic steps. And then again, we'll get to your questions. Just so you know a little bit about me, again, my name is Bill Kenny, and I'm the founder of a company called Meet. And we specialize in helping international business-to-business growth companies soft land and scale in the US through trade shows and in-person events. And so we do that really aiming at a variety of industries in the B2B space, from health, tech, energy, and government services, probably our 4 biggest. And our services range from developing the strategy, providing staff, getting the executive speaking opportunities, and then a whole variety of sales support type services. So let's hop into the actual content. And so the first area we want to talk about is how do we get started? What are some of the sort of overarching concepts or fundamental components of this? Number one is looking at the problem that is created by not integrating marketing, is that, as I kind of said, and hopefully it was described with the pile of instruments, is that marketing is often executed as a series of random exposures as opposed to an integrated results-driven system. And so, yeah, we can certainly have all of these elements, but if there's no complementation, if there's no process, then a variety of things are a challenge. Number one is we probably don't get good results, and two is it's really hard to improve something that we're not making an effort to integrate, and it's hard to sort of get to really leverage all of that resource. So obviously there are many different ways that we can market, and these are just really categories, but we can get into advertising. We can do a variety of digital and interactive types of promotion. We can do sales promotion, direct marketing, PR and publicity, and then of course our area, which is events and in-person marketing. So, and again, our framework here is really focused on B2B, which is a different, or even B2G, so business to business or business to government. We're not really focused on consumer, so there would be different tools or different uses of the tools, and you would prioritize different things depending on ultimately who the customer is. That's really what drives all of these decisions. So the goal of B2B marketing, and this is really direct, really simple. All B2B marketing, and this is a generalization, but in a high majority of the cases, all we're trying to do with B2B marketing is to create a meeting. That's the goal. And I think this is part of where people get confused, is they look at it, for example, when we go to trade shows, we see all sorts of companies that are focused on creating a sale at the trade show, and which may happen outside of the booth, but the booth itself is about getting people into the marketing pipeline, and from there, or the marketing funnel, and from there we're going to move them through, ideally, to get a meeting where we might do needs assessment or a variety of other things to ideally deliver a proposal, hopefully get a good positive decision, and then begin the implementation process. But in the end, and really this is where the prospect transition from being cared for and nurtured by marketing to being cared for and nurtured by sales, is once a meeting is agreed to, once the prospect has said, yes, I'd like to meet, that is generally where the handoff happens from marketing to sales. And so that's even if it's the same person in smaller companies, the functions change. In the function, you go from a marketing function to a sales function, which is needs assessments, proposal, etc. So let's talk about marketing stages, because ultimately, again, and this is, I think, the challenge with many, is they look at all of these modes of marketing, again, digital, interactive, the events and websites and all that stuff, as being at the same level. And what we found is that's not at all the case. So, when we go to a trade show, we start with awareness, and many modes of marketing, your website and so on, that's what you're trying to do. That's that if you will, that gateway to enter the world of your company. And so that prospect creates, essentially at those moments, gets their first impression of your company. And so you start with awareness, then you go to intimacy, and then ultimately to trust. And so at each of these levels, there are going to be different types of marketing, different modes of marketing that will really help us at that level, that they're sort of built for that, and will help us sort of convert from one level to the next. And these are, there's gray lines between them, or gradation, where we sort of transition from awareness to intimacy. And ultimately, as soon as we have awareness, we're beginning to build intimacy. We're at a lighter level there. And certainly as we begin to build trust, we're still building intimacy. And so there's not sort of an ultimate place. The best measure is when somebody says, gosh, I'd like to meet with you. And then we're good to go. And again, trust is where relationships convert to meetings. And that's really ultimately where we want to go. So the B2B marketing funnel, really simple, and we want to sort of preface getting into this with making sure that we all agree, because we want to be friends, we need to agree on certain things. We need to agree on what a prospect is. And we found that this is, while it sounds fundamental, most organizations way over exaggerate what a prospect is for them. And so it becomes really challenging to be focused and actually have a productive marketing process that actually delivers at the end somebody that is convertible into a customer. And that's what we want. We don't want to bother people that don't have a need and that don't fit a variety of other attributes. So, as I said, a prospect has to have a need. That's really important. Second, they need to have money or the means to satisfy that need. And then third, and equally as important, is they need to be urgent. If they're not urgent, they could have a need, they could have money, but if they're not urgent, they may be a prospect in a year, they're not a prospect today. And so we need prospects today or this month. And so we want processes that identify people that fit all three of these parameters. If they fit 2 of 3, they're not a prospect. They need to fit all 3. And so everything we do when we're developing our marketing strategy and when we're looking to integrate marketing needs to consider the result we want. We don't just want meetings, we want meetings with prospects. And prospects that ideally have decision-making capability. So that really narrows down what we're doing and ultimately helps us focus our marketing, not just selecting what modes we're going to use and what frequency and what vehicles or audiences we're going to look to attract. It just helps us really make sure that we're investing in the right types of resources. And also it helps us inform our team. It's really important that not only are we functionally strong centrally, but that all of our distributed people also are operating with that same end in mind. It's almost like people rowing in a boat, right? You want them all rowing the same direction. The boat's going to go much faster and it's going to get somewhere worthwhile. So the easiest way to remember what a prospect is these 3 words: need, money, now. And that, if you get that, then really get very much what a prospect is and how to target them. So when you think of how do we apply this sort of awareness, intimacy, and trust, and you apply this to a funnel, then we're really looking at 3 stages. And so we want to identify the marketing modes that help us with awareness, those that help us with intimacy, and ultimately those that convert us or get us to trust. And so how it's going to look is going to be something like this. And we could add probably all sorts of other types of marketing here, but here are some of the more popular ones. So if we look at awareness, things like our website, the blog, the SEO, and the SEM, so the search engine optimization and the search engine marketing. So paid, unpaid, and paid marketing. And then advertising, print, radio, TV, web, all sorts. And then social media, everything from pages to group participation, all that kind of activation. And then our specialty, you look at events. We don't often recommend sponsorship, but could be sponsorship, exhibiting, speaking, walking through. So any of those modes that creates that initial meeting where somebody gains awareness of us, those are all good. And then we're going to go, and this is called lead nurturing. This is where we're going to move somebody through the various steps of marketing to the point where they convert to a customer. So they go to the middle of the funnel where we're going to begin building intimacy. So they have to make an initial commitment to attend a webinar or maybe to download a white paper where they sort of had our inbound marketing to get there. You're going to have situations where maybe you're subscribing them to your e-news. Certainly you would have to have had them give you their contact info for that. And where you might get referrals. People would be referred into you. So you're actually gaining awareness and intimacy through the relationships you've maintained and nurtured of others. Maybe it's professionals who are complementary to your product or service. And then finally in here, kind of, again, our specialty is the event space. So you're going to move from those awareness events like trade shows and whatnot to a place where you're maybe hosting your own events or having partner events where you're doing executive briefings or hospitality events, things like that, where you're bringing people in for a specific purpose, generally around learning. And so it's a really good way when people opt into events like that, it really speaks to interest. And then, you know, ultimately the bottom of the funnel is when we get to that place where there's trust, when someone says, I know enough now, I trust you enough that I need to have a further conversation, because at least we need to explore whether or not there's something you can do that will help us. And so that process begins. So again, once they get to the bottom of the funnel, it's usually a handoff to the sales team or the sales function to move this forward and either set the meeting or at least go on the meeting if marketing has actually already set the meeting for them. So again, the idea here, we need to move prospects through these steps, and that's where the integration comes in. Each of these modes has a different purpose. Generally, you don't start your awareness with a webinar. It's just unlikely. It does happen, but it's really unlikely that somebody sort of finds out about your webinar without having some previous knowledge of you. So how does this all work? Let's actually take it from the theory and move it into practice. And we'll talk actually about one of our early clients, which was really kind of fun. They were a systems integrator. At the time we met them, they were doing somewhere around 10 million in annual sales. And their target customers were tech and admin executives. So they were typically dealing with people that were making decisions to bring in any type of technology system, typically cloud-based, into their environment. And it could have been in schools, it could have been in businesses, manufacturing, service businesses, any of that kind of stuff. So what we found as we were doing our intake, our kind of early assessment with them, is that they had a variety of marketing assets. They were doing e-news, websites, blogs, webinars, trade shows, and a variety of social media, mostly LinkedIn, but fairly active. And so, yeah, all good. It was all, really good content, and very interesting for sure. The funny thing was, as we were talking to them, we were asking them, obviously we asked tons and tons of questions, and we asked them, as we got to the webinars, we said, so tell us about the webinars. Well, they told us that they were the webinars were happening every week, and they were getting 5 to 6 attendees per webinar, which didn't seem like very much. And you kind of go, gosh, should we do this monthly? But then we got to the number that was truly revolutionary, and they were converting 50% of the people who attended their webinars into appointments. And so and these were generally fairly qualified appointments. And so, yeah, really, really strong. You go, wow, that's a great number. So the content must be really good. You must be finding people who have a significant need. And so that's something we can work with. So the strategy from there was to use all of the media that they had. You think of the e-news, you think of the trade show participation, all of those different modes to drive people to the webinars. And obviously the blogs, there's probably a little bit less of that. That was used more for post-webinar content to drive search results. But by and large, we used most, if not all, of the media to drive webinar attendance. So you ask, what happened from that? So over the course of 2 years, and obviously this was a process, we saw some amazing results. The webinar attendance went up by 10 times by focusing and integrating our marketing. So they were getting 50 to 60 people per week to their webinars. They were still converting 50% to meetings. So think about that. They went, from 2 to 3 meetings after every webinar to 20 to 30 meetings after every webinar. Really, really amazing. And the quality stayed the same, and that was evidenced by that they were closing 10 times more sales and 10 times more revenue after 2 years. Again, by going through a process, by integrating this. It's just significant growth. And they were a good and strong company when we started. Obviously, they were considerably stronger 2 years later, and they're still a great client and still really, it's really been great. But the point here is, it's not about necessarily our service as much as it's about looking at what you have for marketing assets and finding out, kind of where the lever is, and then actually really using that. And so and it's, the point here isn't that there's one mode that works. It's how they work together that's really important. That's really the key. So let's talk about how to integrate. And the first thing to talk about as we talk about how to integrate is, and if you've been in our webinars before, you know that we look at sort of decisions a fisherman would make, which is always kind of a funny way to look at it. But, in order to prospect well, we have to have a really fundamental thought in mind. Besides defining a prospect, we need to kind of think about the 3 decisions that somebody that fishes makes. So first is they decide what they want to catch, which that image before was all of the freshwater fish in North America. So in order to decide what you want to catch as a fisherman or somebody that fishes, you first have to understand, that sounds really simple, and certainly as a marketing person, we think it's really simple to figure out who our prospect is. But you should understand that that there are 34,000 species of fish in the world, and there are all sorts of subspecies below that. So there might be, 100,000 species and subspecies. So by definition, somebody that fishes is eliminating at least 33,999 species of fish when they decide what they want to catch. And that's the same elegant process we as marketers need to figure out. So besides deciding what to catch, and in fact, that informs the next decision, which is where are they going to go fishing? And then finally, what bait will attract that fish that you're trying to catch? So when we think about this, and again, we think about people that have a need, money, and who are urgent, and then we say, well, how do I identify what I want to catch, that most valuable fish for my business where it is today, whether it's based on the product or the stage? There are going to be certain archetypes, certain personas that are going to be best for us. And then we want to decide where are they and what bait will attract them. So where are they will tell us some of the modes available to us, or all of the modes available to us. And then, of course, what bait will be, what offers do we put out there in those modes to entice them to the next step. So as we move them from awareness to intimacy to trust, there needs to be sort of bait attracting them, if you will, to those levels. So this is, again, these concepts sort of all work together in terms of, how do we use these modes, and then how do we kind of move people through the different stages so that we get to those results. So here are the 3 steps that we would suggest in terms of going through this process. So for you, the first thing to do is to find out, look at all of your modes and of marketing, and figure out which one is generally where, after which is where people convert to an appointment. Where do your prospects convert to an appointment? What is the, sort of the mode of marketing that has the best conversion rate? And you can always work on that conversion rate. Where you start is not necessarily where you finish there, but which one has the best or which one's most logically where you should be converting to appointments. That's where you want to really use to drive most of your marketing effort to. So you're going to use the other modes of marketing to drive eyeballs or people to that to that ultimate step. And there may be an intermediate step to sort of get them there, depending on how sophisticated your marketing is. But you're going to ultimately nurture prospects to that lever mode, or whatever that is. In the example, it was we want to get people to webinars, but it easily could be we want to get people to do a self-assessment. There are lots of different tools that might be the next or the last stage before agreeing to an appointment. And then finally, we want to manage that lever. So that means sort of optimize the results we get from that. Maybe we go from 20% conversion rate to 25 to 30 and so on. We want to measure those results and continue to iterate our process so it gets more functional, gets more productive as we go forward. So in the end here, we want to have a wonderful concert. We want these instruments to all integrate together. We want it to be seamless in how it works and ultimately to function very productively. And so we want to use this funnel. Again, we may add or subtract different modes of marketing, different types of marketing in order to move our prospects, number one, into the funnel and begin building that awareness and intimacy, and finally, trust, and convert them to appointments. So we're going to, in just a moment, go to the questions that you all had, and I'm going to come back on screen. But I wanted to share with you our next webinar is Tuesday, November 12th. It is, we got a great guest, Nilesh Gopathy, I'm sorry, from Bangalore, India, who is lived all around the world, lived in the UK, lived in the US, but he is an expert on helping companies enter India. And whether you're interested in market entry or you're interested in growing your company, Nilesh is an expert, and he will have, again, the focus will be on getting into India and expanding, but there'll be a lot of really good lessons in there for any type of growth company. So here's my contact info. I'll certainly follow up, and you can ask any questions after as well. But I'm going to come back on screen now, and we can answer any questions. So, yeah, it looks like we had a couple people maybe that were locked out. Hopefully you were able to hear the webinar. Maybe you weren't seeing the slides, and I apologize for that. One problem when I go off screen. But I want to make sure that we go to the questions that folks submitted. So we've got a whole variety of questions. I would invite you to submit more. We've got, if you look on the right side of your screen, you should have an ability to enter questions. If you click on the chat bubble down at the bottom, you'll reveal that if it's not revealed already for you. So I'm going to go to the previous questions that were submitted at registration. Feel free to share any additional questions. So here's the first one. There are so many tools for marketing that is just there are so many tools in marketing that it's just stressful to select the best one for the best product at the best time. Should a project manager have a market crash course on the menu of options? Yeah, it's funny. This actually reminds me of a question we get all the time by folks, and they say, well, what trade shows do you recommend as a company that helps companies exhibit at trade shows? Actually, we're not at all trade show centric. We don't focus so much. Our process doesn't begin with the trade show. It begins with the prospect. What do they look like? Who do we want to catch? Thinking about the fisherman, right? The fisherman doesn't worry about where they're going to fish first. They worry about what they want to catch. And the more specific they are about that, again, they pick one of 34,000 species. They say, they eliminate 33,999. Say, I want to catch this particular species of fish. And that tells them where they will go fishing. And they may select a subspecies, which would be even better to help them identify where they'll go fishing. So they're going to eliminate lots of places where the fishing isn't good for that particular fish by first deciding what they want to catch. And ultimately, we should always focus on results before we focus on the process. In other words, when you get in your car, you know exactly where you're going to get out. You know, I'm in Connecticut. Sometimes I'll drive to Boston or New York for day trips for business and so on. But I don't just get on the road and go, well, you know, where should I go? I say, well, no, I'm going to this address in Boston or New York. And my directions come from that. And how I'm going to go and the mode I'm going to use to get there. Sometimes I'll drive, sometimes I'll take the train, depending on time of day and traffic expectation and whether it's convenient for public transportation or not. All of those decisions are very similar to the decisions we would make around marketing modes. So we need to decide who the prospect is first. And actually the decision around what modes to use becomes very simple once we decide essentially who we want to catch. So yeah, I think the crash course that I see anyway that most people need is not necessarily about the modes of marketing, but much more about the definition of who their prospect is. And again, I'm not sure, I don't think that you can define that too tightly. I haven't seen a situation where somebody underestimates who their prospect is. More often than not, people overestimate. In other words, they're aiming at too many targets or too broad of a target to be effective. So let's see. The next question is targeting current clients versus prospects and the frequency and content. So I think that's a great question. So the idea is, I guess, around retention and penetration of current accounts versus the acquisition of new accounts. So yeah, and how do we split our time as marketers to that? Certainly in a B2B world, there's certainly some role that marketing plays in retention and penetration, but that is more of a sales function. Once the customer's acquired, I would suggest that's much more of a sales function, although there certainly is some reminding and there's some information that will go out from marketing to existing customers that continues to develop the relationship, maybe exposes the customer to new services in subtle ways and things like that. But by and large, salespeople should be aimed at how do we penetrate further. And then in terms of prospects, we've kind of really talked through that. And I think ultimately we want to really define tightly who that prospect is, and then get those modes that will help us identify and acquire those prospects and ultimately get them to agree to a meeting. So this next question is kind of interesting. So I'll read it the way it's sort of positioned. So frustration is mostly balancing brand and performance and balancing awareness and acquisition. So yeah, the idea of balancing brand and performance. So branding, I think in the case of most small and mid-market businesses, branding is a fairly expensive exercise. And so because there's usually a larger company that, trying to get brand recognition over, the sort of the name brands is difficult. So, and that's why we need to be even more specific about who we're targeting and the bait we'll use needs to be very specific to our customer, or else we're going to end up bogging down the sales team with lots of suspects as opposed to prospects. And we want prospects which have a need, they have money, and they're urgent. And so, yeah, the idea of balancing awareness and acquisition. So we kind of went through those three stages: awareness to intimacy to trust. And trust is where we, in a B2B world, get somebody to convert to a meeting, which is ultimately where we want to get to. So I would say, again, most of our efforts should be targeting getting meetings I think building brand, while sometimes important, one of our clients is in government services. They do a lot of work for the Department of Defense, and in some cases they can't do a lot of direct selling, and so branding is kind of the only tool that's left. So we have to do some branding work, but where we can, we find it much more effective to meet with people that we've established have a need, have money, and are urgent, and that ends up being much more productive from a conversion standpoint. And again, feel free to submit additional questions. I've got just a few more, and then we'll get to yours as well. So let's see. The next question is determining effective content for website and social media. So this is really a direct line from that customer. So actually, HubSpot, if you haven't read any of their work, HubSpot has great material on this. But ultimately, they would say, sort of your target is the buyer persona, which is not just, sort of the role, but it's really the attitude, where they are, what things are keeping them awake at night, really help define that persona that you're looking for. And it's not all sort of purchasing managers in manufacturing, or it's not all production managers in manufacturing or in aerospace manufacturing. It's actually ones that have this subset of concerns, that have these special things that they're trying to take care of. And by understanding that, and you think of, putting yourself in your customer's viewpoint, the titling that will end up being revealed by the search results. So what questions are people Googling that look like your customer? And think back to the last 10 questions that prospects have asked you. Those are probably should be your next 10 blogs, webinars, any of those kinds of things, because ultimately it's going to be what helps sort of nurture your leads to a place where they say, gosh, we should meet. Hopefully that was helpful. Let's see, clarity of message, which media and when. So that's a bit along the same lines. In terms of clarity of message, again, I think you want to use language that your customer uses. You want to use, that similar jargon, a similar way of speaking and so on, so that I think the idea is called mirroring, where you're looking to really communicate at the level and in the method that your customer does, because ultimately that's who you want to relate to. So integrating plans and actions. So we've kind of talked through that. The 3 steps. Really directly were figure out what thinking of all your marketing modes, figure out which one is the lever that actually converts prospects to appointments, and then use that. We used the example of the webinars of one of our clients. They were getting an incredible conversion rate to appointments. You use all of your other marketing modes, or most of your other marketing modes, to steer people to that conversion mode, and so that you're getting, in this case, we are using the trade show attendance and the e-news and so on to drive people to the webinars, and then the customer maintained still a very strong conversion rate, and in fact increased their sales, increased their revenue by more than 10 times over 2 years. It was really, really, really effective, and we continue to use that strategy, and it served us very well and helped many customers. And so the last question that I have, and again, looks like we're getting some coming in, so good. So the last question I have that was pre-submitted is, integrated solutions for nascent markets in the enterprise segment. Enterprise customers are really our favorite. They have certain things that are keeping them awake at night. They have certain problems. the best answer to all of this is, get really familiar with your prospect. If you have a current client on board that you would say is an archetype of what you want, then spend time with them, love them, get together with them, find out, if there are things that you don't think that you know about them in terms of why they chose you, or what their priorities are and so on. You need to know that, not only because it will inform your actions about what we're talking about here from a marketing standpoint, but it's also the way that you retain customers, is that kind of intimacy. And if you're not finding that information out, one of your competitors is, and they will begin to build a relationship that you'll never be able to overcome. So we need that information. And if we can learn from our customers, and we can learn, again, think of the best of your customers, the one that's really the prototype for what you want to build in terms of additional customers that in that segment. If you can learn more about them, what their priorities are, what's keeping them awake at night, what their goals are, if you're looking 12 and 24 months out. And then one of the kind of coolest questions that someone long ago taught me to ask, which worked out really well, is you sort of think of Columbo, that famous detective, TV detective, and he would ask a question, it's kind of, you'd say, well, one more question, as he was walking out the door. And that question was, sort of, besides what we just met about, what else is it that you're looking to solve? And that can really reveal a lot. And as you can imagine, a lot of people kind of struggle with that question at first, because it's delivered correctly. It's very empathic, and it's very open-ended. But if you sort of learn golden silence, right? You learn to be quiet once you've asked that question. And what ends up happening is that person will either say, gee, I'm all set, and that just means they need a little more training, and you'll help them at the next meeting, and you'll continue to ask that over time, and you'll get answers. But the people that respond, and at first it may be 50% respond, you'll hear everything from professional needs, that things that are fires burning in their on their desk that you don't see, to personal things. And obviously the professional things, from a standpoint of replication, are what we want to focus on from a standpoint of what we might use in terms of content marketing. Things like regulatory change, and dealing with shifting trade rules, or whatever. It could be anything, but it chances are there are going to be certain things that they say that relate to, whether broadly or directly, to what you do, and then you can begin tying those things into your content, and building content around that. And so it can be a really productive way to go. But the rule number one is always love your customer. Find out again what's keeping them up at night, and that really enables so much more. Let's see. Oh, the first thing on the list here was somebody who needed to go. So I guess I don't have to answer that question. And then from Mauricio, how are you, Mauricio? Hope you're well. Thumbs are up. Good. Let's see. Our marketing people, Karina, keeps insisting all of us should join Facebook and Instagram, but they come with a lot of cumbersome stuff. What's your advice about that? Yeah, it's interesting. You think of Facebook and Instagram. Think about, and for those that don't know, Mauricio runs Hub 55, which is an international incubator that specializes in helping Brazilian companies enter international markets. And I guess I think about your customer, and I certainly wouldn't argue the point that social media has some value for you. I would though question whether Facebook and Instagram are where your customer is hanging out and where you're going to build credibility. I got to think that LinkedIn and Twitter are probably more of where your customer would be. And so that would change the type of content you would do. It would change, certainly, the vehicles are different, and sort of the language you would use and the professional approach you would use on LinkedIn is considerably different than what you might do on Facebook and on Instagram. And so, I think you're going to, you're going to attract a different type of fish, right? And so, you want more mature companies. I'm projecting here. I'm assuming, but I'm assuming you want more mature companies, and you want. I think the challenge of entrepreneurship marketing is that today, and you know this much better than I do, is today there are entrepreneurs, and you may even put those in air quotes, entrepreneurs who are, it's a lifestyle to be in the community. And there are people that are actually looking to build valuable businesses. And I think you're really looking at two totally different market segments. If you're looking to attract, sort of the lifestyle entrepreneur, those that want to be in the co-working space for their, and always come in with their Starbucks and their, whatever. And it's a different type of person, and they want to, sort of be rah-rah about it. Usually what you find is the most productive entrepreneurs never show up at any of that stuff, right? They're barely checking on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn would be the one place if they're anywhere, that you'd be sure to find them, because that's where it has, it's when they do go to stuff, that's where they know people are going to check them out. And if we can, I think there's a big difference between kind of looking like we're doing something strong and then actually doing something strong. So, and you don't need that many recruits. This isn't like you need 1,000 prospects. You're not in a retail situation. You're very much in a B2B situation. And, you need, what do you need? 50 good recruits a year. So you don't need, you need 500 prospects to create that. I don't know. So it's not like you need, thousands or tens of thousands of prospects. So anyway, did that help? Your mic's not on, but cool. Is there any other question that anyone has that I can help with? Well, this has been great. We really appreciate everybody being on this call, and certainly encourage you, if there are additional questions or if there's any collaboration that we can do, just let us know. And it's been a pleasure to chat with you all. We'll have a few blog posts on this topic that may add additional information over the next couple of weeks. But again, we've got another great webinar coming up on November 12th, and hopefully you all can make it for that. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye now. Have a good one. Bye now.
Thanks, Mauricio. Take care.
You too.